that's the positive. I think the negative, obviously, is the defense. They rank in the bottom 5 of the league in pretty much every major statistical category on defense. Injuries have played a factor, no doubt, but still, that's very disappointing when you talk about head coach and Matt Patricia, that was his background in New England. It was a defensive background, and they just haven't been able to figure out that side of the ball, both rushing and passing at times. They've been really inconsistent, and that's probably the positives and negatives you take from 3-8-1 at this point.
We are here with Tim Twentyman. He is the senior writer for TheLions.com. Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing just looking at the statistics when you look at the offensive side and you think, man, they've been through Stafford, they've been through Driscoll, now they're at Blau, and they still rank amongst the leaders in a lot of offensive categories. And as you kind of mentioned, the defense has just kind of crumbled here. And Viking fans are very familiar with Darrell Bevell. He was the OC here for actually a while. Let's switch to the Vikings. Obviously a lot different than last year as they stood this late in the season. What are some of the things that you like about the Vikings this season, and what do you think has been the biggest difference from last season to now?
Yeah, when I look at them, I think the way Kirk Cousins is playing, I think people in Minnesota have to be pretty excited about that. I think if I remember correctly from looking at the statistics earlier this week, that he leads the league in passer rating. He's not turning the football over. And I think the crazy thing when you look at that team at this point is I think that offense is carrying them. When I looked at some of the defensive statistics,
100%.
I was actually a little bit shocked that, they were 11th here, 15th here, 16th here, 20th here. I mean, for years and years and years, when you looked at this matchup, you were like, well, here's a Vikings defense that ranks in the top 10 in every major statistical category. Can their offense, not turn the ball over, stay on schedule, and help them win? I think it's been a flip this year. I think that offense has been explosive. Obviously, Dalvin Cook, 6th leading rusher in the league. He's been terrific. And that's been just a team that's been carried by their offense and Kirk Cousins, and their defense has struggled at times. I think that's been maybe the kind of weird revelation with that Vikings team this year, is the flip from years past being a defensive-dominated team to now being, I think the offense has really got them to where they are right now.
100% correct, and that's kind of been the culture change of Mike Zimmer. Mike Zimmer came in here and completely switched the defense after Leslie Frazier ran it into the ground. But yeah, this first year, this is really the first year that the Vikings defense has not looked the same. The secondary doesn't look the same. Xavier Rhodes is struggling tremendously. This is a guy that I remember I used to have the argument where it was like Darius Slay, Xavier Rhodes, and I would have to argue it off, but there's no debate anymore. Xavier Rhodes is struggling mightily right now, and they're really thin at corner. Trey Waynes is probably their best guy, and Mackenzie Alexander as well.
Well, you're going to see some of that. For years and years and years, it's been kind of the same cast of characters, the same core guys. Those guys are 5 years older now. Those guys are starting to get into their 30s now. Some of those main, guys that have been kind of their linchpins on defense for so many years. And so, they've got to get some of those younger guys, in the mix. They've got to start drafting young guys, fitting them in. And that's just kind of the evolution that you have to take, in the NFL. You've got to continually try to get younger. Now you want to, mix young with veterans and experience with new, but I think they need to do a little bit, maybe a better job with that on the defensive side of the ball, fit some new guys in. They've done a nice job with, some guys. Hughes would be one, but I just think they need maybe a little bit more of that on the defensive side of the ball, because look, some of those guys are aging, the Harrison Smiths and those guys, they're getting older, and the Everson Griffins and all those guys. At some point, you've got to have that kind of their replacements in place and get those guys, some time and kind of move to a little bit younger phase in your defense.
100% agree. We're here with Tim Twentyman from Lions.com. He is their senior writer. Great stuff from him. Let's get into the matchups of this individual game. What are some of the things that kind of pop out at you, whether it be the wide receiver cornerback, because that's basically what I'm kind of looking at. I know that Galladay and Marvin Jones had a big day last time against his secondary. Give me some of the matchups you're looking out for on Sunday.
Yeah, I think the big one, and you talked about Rhodes, and then obviously you just mentioned Galladay and Jones. Galladay and Jones both had 9 touchdowns apiece. They lead the league. It's pretty rare this late in the season that you have 2 teammates that lead the league in touchdown receptions, and so that's where the Lions have been really good on offense. Is on the outside with their receivers, and so the Rhodes and the Waynes and the Hughes and against Lions receivers, I think that's a huge matchup in this game. And then I think it always starts up front too when you talk about Minnesota, and you talk about Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin. I think Taylor Decker and Rick Wagner, the 2 tackles for Lions, have to be really good. I think they were good last week against Khalil Mack and Leonard Floyd and those guys in Chicago. Blau was sacked twice. One of those was late on a 3rd and long, a kind of have to have it type play where he had to hold the ball. But look, he was sacked twice and hit 3 times in that game. That's a good Chicago defense over there. So I think the Lions have to look to for a similar performance up front. Keep David Blau clean. David's got a pretty good pocket presence, likes to extend plays. And when he does, he's not afraid to throw the ball down the field. Like his first NFL completion was a 75-yard bomb to Galladay. So, this isn't a dink and dunk with your third-string quarterback here. The offense stays the same. He's going to be aggressive. He's going to throw the ball down the field. But in order to do that, he's got to have protection. So I think the 2 big ones for me are kind of those the tackles and the pass rush edge guys from Minnesota, and then those receivers and those corners. The Lions are going to throw the ball down the field. They've done it all year. They lead the league in 20-plus yard completions, and so that's just kind of going to be the MO for this game. And I think those are the 2 big matchups.
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of get into this last one we'll do here on David Blau, the rookie from Purdue. Not a lot of film, obviously, 1 game. What were some of the things that stood out for you? Do you think this kid's got a spot in this league?
He's a guy that the Lions had their eye on, for a while. They traded for him at the end of the preseason. Actually, right after the preseason game with Cleveland, he was playing for Cleveland. Detroit had their eye on him, saw him in person, and swapped 7th-round picks with Cleveland for him. So he's a guy they liked through the process. He's a guy at Purdue that, played in some big games. He's the last quarterback to beat Ohio State. But he threw a lot of interceptions too, 43 interceptions in college. And so that was the knock. It's probably one of the reasons why he was an undrafted type guy. But he's got a good arm. He's decent athlete. And, like I said, look, Purdue likes to throw the ball down the field, and that hasn't changed with Blau entering the NFL. And that's something that Darrell Bevel wants to do too. A lot of play action, use those guys on the outside, throw the ball down the field, and Blau throws a nice ball. And so, he's fighting these last months to, earn a spot next year as Matthew Stafford's backup. I think that's very undecided at this point between Jeff Driscoll and Blau. Lions have had 11 different quarterbacks on their roster this year, kind of trying to find a right mix behind Matthew Stafford. And so it's a good opportunity for Blau this last month to, play well, maybe win a game or 2 here and earn himself, some money and a backup job next year.
Tim? Packers are sitting at 9-3 first place. Vikings 8-4. Chicago 7-6. Last one. What's your prediction for the NFC North over the next 4 weeks?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough to beat the Packers, guys. You guys have that matchup, I think, week 16, right? So, and that's going to be a huge one, and that's in Minnesota, if I remember correctly. And so, what a huge game for you guys. I think that game is going to decide it. I think you guys having 3 of your last 4 at home certainly helps. But yeah, I think it's going to, you having Chicago week 17 and Green Bay getting a Detroit team that obviously isn't playing, that well defensively. Aaron Rodgers, that's going to be a game they probably need. Advantage Green Bay maybe right there. So, we'll just have to see. But, I think if I had to put some money down on it right now, I'd probably go Green Bay. And you guys kind of sneak in there at the wild card. But hey, that's why we play the games, right?
Tim.
One's going to be you.
We bring him on. Did such a good job until the end. I'm just playing around. But yeah, the Vikes last 4 games here, folks, is home against Detroit. They go on the road. It's supposed to be a Sunday night game against the Chargers. They switched that, thank God, so we don't have to stay up late.
And that's never easy going to the West Coast. Now, I know you guys are more centrally located, but still, I mean, that's never easy.
100% correct. Then they've got the Packers at home. I think that's a Sunday night game, and then home against Chicago.
And I think the Packers have Washington this week, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, their last 4 games.
Washington, 2 3-win teams in there, and Washington and Detroit plus, Minnesota and Chicago again, right?
Yeah, their last 4 is home against Washington, home against Chicago, at Minnesota, at Detroit.
Okay. So, I mean, strength of schedule, you've got to give the nod to Green Bay.
Yep.
Obviously, they've got a game in hand. But, again, you guys got your opportunity Week 16, so, step up and take it.
100% correct. Tim, awesome job today. Seriously, make sure you follow him on Twitter at Tim Twentyman. Does some great stuff for Lions.com. Read some of his articles this week. I appreciate you for coming on and giving us some time today, Tim. Have a great, great week.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Here on the Strom Sports Show. All right, here we go now. 3-word games, one of my favorite things to do on the Strom Sports Show. We're going to do all 4 professional sports teams, what I'm feeling right now. Just describe in 3 words, and they're very easy, I think. I really didn't have to take a lot of time for these 4 professional sports teams with the 3 words. Let's start with the Minnesota Vikings here. 3 words. Get going, defense. I think the biggest thing that we talked about coming into this Viking year was how was the offensive line going to hold up? Because last year, Kirk Cousins was constantly under duress. He couldn't set his feet. He panicked. It changed the way he played. And the offensive line was really the downfall of the whole season. Let's be honest here. The defense kind of got going towards the end of the year. It's the offense that couldn't get going. So coming into this year, I was very concerned about the front 5 and how they're going to be able to protect Cousins and open holes for Cook. The defense was kind of like a second thought. But my goodness, have they struggled this year. Individually, Xavier Rhodes struggling. Linval Joseph can't stay healthy. Mike Hughes really struggling. Let's just read some of the numbers here, which is kind of deceiving because if I read you the points per game, they're giving up 20.5, and that's 11th in the league. But that's still kind of – the Vikings defense is held at a higher standard. I think if you look at, Arizona and you see 20.5 points per game, you're like, screaming to the gods. I mean, thank God. But I think as Viking fans and just as an organization, the way Zimmer has – basically changed the whole narrative about the defense because Leslie Frazier pretty much ran it into the ground. The expectation level for the Vikings is top 5 in every category. And to be at 20.5 points per game, I mean, it's not Zimmer-like. You go down the line here, opposing yards per game, 347. That's 16th in the NFL. It's not Zimmer-like. You go down the list, the opposing rushing yards per game, you've got 104. You're giving up 104 yards on the ground, 15th in the league. The defense, which was the calling card, which was the mantra, which is why people fell in love with the Vikings, it's not the same defense. And it's not because of guys like Harrison Smith. I think Harrison Smith is still playing at a high level. I think that Everson Griffin is having one of his better years. Daniil Hunter's been a little quiet, but he's still been productive, younger guy. I mean, my thought process here is, man, what if Anthony Barr ended up in New York? Because he's played really well for this team. I think that the secondary has been the biggest concern. Xavier Rhodes, especially this year, has just been awful, putrid, cannot stay within his man. I mean, the Seattle game, Xavier, he gets beat by 15 yards. And I said it off the jump. I said that as soon as he got beat, I think he just mailed it in. I think he said, you know what? I'm not going to. There's no way that I'm going to reach this guy. I'm going to play the blame game. I'm going to go by this. I'm going to go by my story and say, hey, I thought I had over the top coverage. And you saw that, and you saw on the sideline, ESPN did a good job showing Xavier Rhodes going over to Harrison Smith, giving him a hug, saying, oh, you got it. It was somewhere in the lines of, oh, Harrison, I thought you had it. And Harrison looked at him and said, nah, we weren't in that coverage. Right? And you see him throwing his helmet around. I really think that he mailed it in. And he has to play well for this team because the way the secondary was the last few years, it gave Zimmer flexibility, whether he wanted to play an aggressive style, he wanted to go man, he wanted to go zone, he wanted to blitz. Cover corners are, I think, one of the most important things in the entire game of football, because it changes the way that you can play. Zimmer can't play it as an aggressive game style that he wants to. And that's why I think you're seeing a lot of the rushing problems with this defense. I think it starts with the corners because Zimmer's got to be extra careful. So he's got to give some cushion on the offensive line and defensive line, which is giving Chris Carson, Rashad Penny. The Seattle Seahawks ran through that defense. And you can't do that against Russell Wilson because it causes play action. 3 words, get going, defense. That's what the Vikings need to do if they want to make some type of run in the playoffs. Okay, next one here. Twins. This one's funny. Talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. Every single freaking